Joining us now is two members of our Clarksville Police Department. They're with the Major Crimes Unit of our police department. They are detectives, and I assume specifically homicide detectives Allan Charvis, or not Charvis, and Tim Anderson. Yes. How you doing, Tim? Pull your microphone up to you. But there you go. Thanks for coming in, and I know you guys are... Gosh, you seem like you're on the clock all the time to take a few minutes to come by and visit us. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Because you got a million other things to do. And you may not remember early in my career and your career, you made that clear to me. You know, you learn you learn pretty quick when you're dealing with police officers and detectives, whatever, kind of where you are. You and Ed Patterson are the two I learned right away on what the protocol would be so far as, you know, the media and so forth. You've softened a bit over the years, I think, in your relations with the media and so forth. You have a job to do, and you're focused, and, you know, you really don't have a whole lot of time to be tap dancing and this and that with the media, but there is an upside to it, I think, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Right.
How long have you been in this police department, Allan?
I've been here, this is my 20th year.
How long have you been investigating homicides?
I started, my first homicide was in '92.
And why? Is that just something...
I wanted to do it.
You wanted to do it? Tim, how about you? How long have you been doing this?
I've been since 1988. I've been with the department, and since late 2006, I think, early 2007 is when I started working homicide.
You have obviously a keen interest in solving those crimes?
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously, you want to be...
The interest level in solving these crimes, there's... Personally, for me, there's nothing more serious that, you know, that I could be doing in the job that I'm doing.
Allan, are you two partners?
Well, there's three of us. Tim Finley's the other member of our homicide unit, and we work together. Just on every case, we're all usually there on a homicide. But we not only work homicides, we work all deaths that are not attended or supposed to. If you're not supposed to die, we usually show up.
Oh. That's good. You're a little late, but, you know, someone has to call out, and obviously one of you are on call, I guess, all the time if there has been a death.
On call.
And, all right, you get a call about a death, and you come out to the scene. You are supposed to determine then that there is or isn't any foul play involved?
Well, what happens when we go out is the medics have usually gotten there, and if it's a person who's on a lot of medication, who's real sick, they will usually contact the doctor and see what's going on, and the police are there checking to see if there's any signs of any foul play, and they make a determination before contacting us, and then they'll contact us, run it by us, and we either come out or we don't.
You don't have to make a call, Tim. You don't have to physically go to the scene and determine, yes, it was natural or they fell?
Well, in most cases, we do go to the scene, but like Allan said, if there's a case like somebody in hospice care, somebody who has had an extensive medical history, been in and out of the hospital, you know, we rely a lot on the EMS people that are there. Yeah. And but if there's ever any question, you know, we're out there on the scene, and we start the process.
Right. Well, we want to get into what the process is, but here of late, it's been obvious, it appears, that you do have a homicide on your hands. You don't want the scene compromised. Right. I guess most notably so far this year was the woman and the two children. Police officers came, entered the property, discovered the bodies, and I assume at that point they call you. Right.
What they do in a case like that, they went in, as soon as they saw what they had, they checked, and everybody was deceased. They back out, secured the scene till we get there, and we go from there. Either A, we can go ahead and process the scene, or B, we have to get a search warrant to go in the scene. It just depends on the circumstances.
So when you get there, and let's just use this, and I don't want to get into the specifics or whatever, other than the order of things that have to be done, because I assume that, and I do watch too much TV, I do assume that at that point you're working for the deceased, and you're looking for, you know, what caused this, who caused this, are they still out there, and so forth and so on. So you drive up onto the scene, the officers are there, they've taped off the area, I assume. Where do you go from here?
We start by getting briefed by the first officers and supervisors that are on the scene, and then we determine, A, we can go in and do our job, or B, we got to get a search warrant to go in and do our job. And then when we get that finalized, we call the crime scene team. They come out and they start the process of processing the crime scene, and then we start running down leads, whether A, we have somebody in custody already or a good suspect. And if that's not the case, we start doing some background on the victim or victims and go from there.
And Tim, when you come on a scene, and you know, I'm glad that you guys do what you do, and you do a great job at what you do, but there's a lot of time spent on the scene with a body laying there that to most folks is kind of creepy, but yet you're working the scene. You guys are naturally suspicious.
Right.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
Well, when it comes to a crime scene, you've got really one opportunity to get that evidence that's really going to, potentially make your case. So you can't go in haphazardly. You have to be very thorough about it. Things are thought out well before they're done. Our crime scene team does a good job at it, but it's not something that you want to rush, because when it's all said and done, you've not only, and it's one of the ways that I look at it, is you want to be able to answer the questions that victim's family is going to ask about, what happened to that loved one, and then also prove the elements of the crime for court later down the road, and that takes time.
Allan, is your adrenaline running, or are you sad? Are you mad? Are you ticked off? What sort of emotions do you guys have to keep in check while you're standing there around, especially with children involved, and you're working a scene, you're crossing T's, dotting I's? I mean, what are the emotions you're feeling?
It depends. Each one varies. You have to realize that you're there for the victims, because you are the one that has to figure out what happened, because they're gone. They can't tell you what happened. And your emotions vary. I mean, with children, of course, your emotions are going to be different than with somebody who's an adult or somebody who's involved in illegal activities, but you still have to do the same job. You have to give 100% on every one of them, because the ultimate outcome is to have somebody locked up for doing something like this.
Tim, when you're working a case involving a death or a number of deaths, do suspects present themselves fairly quickly? In most cases, if, like in this example, and I don't want to keep using this example, but obviously those who are closest to them, or what are you looking for, witnesses who may have seen who was last at the house or the apartment, or do suspects typically present themselves to you?
It's really different. Every case is a little bit different. One of the things that we try to do early on is establish a timeline of try to establish approximately when the crime happened, back it up a ways, and then figure out the activities that person was engaged in, who they were engaged in those activities with, and try to find the people that were there with them when it happened. And that's kind of gives you a starting point. Suspects don't always pop out. I mean, sometimes a suspect can end up being somebody that initially was a witness, and then later down the road things develop into point that the evidence starts pointing towards that person. So you just follow that.
Is it a terrible assumption that when you're involved, you have obviously a woman and children, that we're looking for a boyfriend or a husband or an ex?
Well, that's the first thing that pops up usually, is relationships. You have to look at closest first and work out, I guess, is the best way to put it. Closest person to that person, and go from there.
Detective Allan Charvis and Tim Anderson are with us. They are homicide detectives with our Clarksville Police Department, and we appreciate them being here. Now, you come to the scene. I can't imagine. I'm sure there are some that are worse than others, but are you worried about the fact that whoever did this is still out there? They are still out there. Is there an urgency to, find a car, find a suspect, find the people, whoever, and get a bolo out and find these people?
Yes. again, each case varies. Some of them you have something that has just occurred and you have some evidence or information that a person was seen leaving the scene. You try to get that out as quickly as possible. And then again, sometimes you'll find them and they've been there for a day or two, and then it's not as urgent because you can tell that they've already gone. They're not in the area. And the extreme urgency is not there.
The case that just developed over the last week or so of the gentleman driving down the interstate, and you, in our jurisdiction, obviously that becomes your case.
Right.
That's what's happened. Why does the state not handle that? The trooper made the stop, discovered the body. It's just, I guess, wherever.
It happened in the city of Clarksville, and we usually take the cases in the city of Clarksville that occur here.
Tim, is there any such thing as an open and shut case?
No.
Do you ever feel as though you have an open and shut case and then you get in court and realize you don't?
There's cases that you feel very, very confident about, and then there are cases where your level of confidence is not, absolute certain. But I think the important thing is that we're not going to go after anybody unless we're confident, that they're involved in it and that they have a level of responsibility for it.
Can you tell, I guess you can tell that you're dealing with, well, obviously you're dealing with, a dangerous person or a person who's off a bit. Are you able to determine that, they could do this again? I mean, they could, they're all different, cases are all different?
Everything's different, and it's hard to say if a person's going to actually kill again because it's such a traumatic thing and such an extreme thing to kill somebody. It's the worst thing that a person can do is to take a life. And I'm going to say that I can't tell if a person's going to do it again. You have a feeling that if not put away, will they kill again? And I've had feelings about some folks like that.
When you're putting your case together and gathering your evidence, are you doing so in a way to deal with what you will end up having to prove in court? In other words, Allan, you both had many years' experience in doing this and been in court and testifying and so forth. Some will come along that will create doubt in the jury or will throw a monkey wrench in your case. And so as you're investigating other homicides and other terrible crimes, and you're putting your case together, do you remember that, 2 years ago, this one was thrown out for that, or we didn't get this for that. We better watch how we package this necklace, or we better make sure that the fingerprints are properly secured or something. I mean, I hate to think
you learn by experience, and you look back on things in your mind. You may not do it openly, but it's in your mind that something has occurred in the past that might affect the way you do something now, because you have to try to visualize yourself sitting in a courtroom in front of a judge and a jury and explaining what went on. And fortunately, past experiences, you do learn from them.
Is that good or bad?
I think it's good that you learn from them because you know what you're up against when you go to court, and you know, again, what you're doing today, how it's going to turn out later.
But is there a downside to it because of the fact that your investigation and what you guys have to do is dictated by what something or what someone or whatever may have happened in a previous case? I mean, I'm just wondering, do you react to what maybe some other attorney or another case may have presented in the way of your evidence when you know, as you mentioned earlier, Tim mentioned earlier that, when we have someone who is a suspect that we're ready to go knock on his door, I mean, I assume, and we say all the time, we read, in paper or see the police reports that, there's a high likelihood that this guy did something wrong. But when he gets into court, it's all, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, are you affected by that, or does your investigation change because of that?
I think it's not that the investigation changed, and I may need to back up here for just a second. We don't look for evidence to support a theory that we already have. I mean, the evidence is what it is. The evidence tells the story. it's our job to pull all the evidence together, whether that evidence points towards one person or points towards another person. And then we come back and we sit down with the attorneys, with the state's attorneys, and look at all the evidence. And, good and bad. And we present the evidence that we've got. And in a lot of cases, you're only going to get, what's there.
You get what you get.
You get what you get, and you go with what you've got.
Allan, when and you've done this a while, it's like anyone else doing anything, I guess. You get used to it, you become numb to it, you become somewhat hardened to it, and you've come to a scene, and I keep referencing these two recent cases. All right, how long will you work that day on that case? And I'm not sure when you got called out on the...
Usually on a new case, we'll work.
Because you can't sleep?
Right.
Are you pretty hyped up?
You just run with it, because I don't want to paraphrase TV shows, but like the 48-hour TV show, you pretty much, you're going to get most of your information and evidence in the first couple of days. So you usually work around the clock as long as you can, physically can, until you get to a point where you've got somebody in custody, or you've run out not every lead, but every urgent lead that's there.
Yeah. If you're the lead investigator on a case, Allan, which you are on many occasions, and you have exhausted your 48 hours or 24 hours, and you're just dog-tired and need a rest, need to eat, do you pass that off to someone else, or does it sit until you get a nap, Tim? What happens? It is your case. Anything that develops, is somebody working on that while you're taking a break?
It just depends. Usually if it's your case, you stick with it because you have the most information in your head about it. You're the gatherer of the information. But if we need to pass it off, it's pretty easy, because the other person has been paralleling you more or less and knows as much about it, or can bring you up to speed pretty quick. But usually we keep it and we do rest, and then if we run out of leads, we start over and go back to the beginning.
I think what's interesting, and I want to always point out when I get a chance to meet with law enforcement folks, is that you do have a life, and you do have families, and you do have things you like to do, and places you like to go, and people you like to hang out with, and yet your life is tied up in investigating these cases, and those images have got to play over and over and over and over and over. How do you separate it? How can you go out and hoist a beer, or play around a golf, or hang out with your buddies, grill some wings, and do whatever? It's so difficult, I think, for the common Joe to understand that you do have a life and you do need to leave it at the office. How do you do it?
Well, you can still do everything, but it never leaves you, I guess is the best way to put it. It affects you, and going into investigating homicides, or you're told by people like me, that it's going to affect you and it's going to stay with you. It's hard to get it gone. People say, well, you can go do this, you can go do that. You can go out and have a good time, like say, have you a beer or two with the fellas and do things, but it's still there. It may go numb for a few minutes, but it's always there.
Tim, what does it do to you? When are you going to move on? When you realize, you're eat up with it. You love it. You enjoy, this is a great career for you. You enjoy your work. All right. Do you not see yourself ever having to walk away from this and going over to some other part of the department?
I think about it every once in a while, but actually, seriously, no. I'm probably here to stay until I just can't take it anymore, because I think and I'm learning, and I've only been doing this a couple of years now, but, I would sit down this morning before I come in here, and I can see every victim, each victim of each case that I've had since I started. And you think about each one. You don't dwell on it. It's not something that you allow to consume you, but you do think about it. And because you want to provide the answers to the families of those people.
Has anybody ever gotten away, Allan, from you?
You mean as far as
suspects? Case you knew you had?
Oh, yeah, there's cases out there that are not solved. We have several, and some of them I know who did the killing, but they just don't have the evidence.
Really?
Yes.
How do you wrestle with that? Do you know who it is? Are they still here? Are you in contact with them? Do you know where to find them? How do you
It's
do
tough.
it?
I keep up with them. I had a couple that one fellow lived close by without getting into too much detail, and I would show up at his door every once in a while, and he finally moved away.
Why were you showing up at his door?
Just to let him know I still think about him and stuff.
Yeah.
And I called and checked on another fellow yesterday who doesn't live here anymore, and I called the local department trying to get them to help me out with him.
Isn't that harassment? Wouldn't somebody
No.
consider that harassment? You
I
just
mean, if you're
dropped
not
him
doing
off
it-
a sub sandwich or something?
You're not doing anything bad. You're
Yeah.
just talking to him, hoping that someday they may get a conscience.
I wouldn't want you coming to my house if you brought me a bouquet of flowers. But that is interesting. What is the most, can we assume that the Taco Bell murders were the most celebrated murders or
That was-
crime here?
The Taco Bell murder was the most victims and probably got the more press, most press up until Baskin Robbins. But Taco Bell has been,
Yeah.
what, 94 is when it
Well,
happened.
Baskin Robbins was after Taco Bell, right?
Right.
Yeah. And you handled both of those.
No, Robert
No.
Miller actually handled Baskin Robbins. I did not.
Were you involved in that one?
I
No.
just, very little.
They got the right guy,
Yeah.
as far as you know.
Oh, yeah. They got DNA on him.
Well, why is he still living? Okay, I shouldn't have said that. 9:30 is our time. We're visiting with Detective Allan Charvis and Detective Tim Anderson, who are with our police department and the Major Crimes Unit, and they investigate homicides. And we'll talk more about what they do in a moment. Stand by. Clarksville Police Department Major Crimes Unit, we appreciate Phil Ashby for helping us arrange this interview, and I don't know how it went down. I don't want to ask, but I really don't. Because we've had Ashby here before, and we really appreciate him. We're real fans of law enforcement here. They never get the credit they deserve. And when I called Ashby this week and said, I hadn't seen Charvis in a while, and he said, well, you don't want to. And I said, what does that mean? And come by, and obviously there's been too much news lately about, you guys having to work overtime. We appreciate you guys coming in, and I think that the big thing I've learned about how the public reacts to the popos and the police and whatnot is that, we're glad you're here, do it. We don't want to hear about it. Just do your thing. And then most of the publicity you get is when they get off.
Right.
Or something happens. Well, you guys screwed up. Or there's never a cop there when you need one. The emotions that a police officer has to deal with, whether he's a cruiser or an officer on the streets and answering domestics, or if it's a detective like yourself looking for clues and finding the bad guy. I just don't think the public really appreciates, how do you wrestle with these emotions. I mean, I have seen crime scenes and crime scene photos. I've seen things that I really don't ever want to see again. I could not do this for a living. And so between that and then unsolved cases, you mentioned earlier some you knew did it, never got convicted for it, and so forth. I just don't see how you wrestle with that. How are you guys not stone running blind drunk? How are you guys not, cuckoo? I mean, really. You leave a scene like that, you have children involved, you have like the Taco Bell scene, we were just talking about Baskin Robbins. I saw that scene, would not want to see anything like that again. I just don't see how you just don't, pull out your service revolver and find the guy and just do us all a favor, because we all talk about that over coffee. Well, hell, I'll take him out back just to make him eat a bullet. How do you all wrestle with that?
Well, we have that emotions too, just like everybody else. That would be a good solution, but we know that that's not the proper solution. That we have to do our jobs in order to bring them to justice and let a jury try the facts and make a decision. Once we get it to a jury, we've done everything we can do. We've run down every lead we can. We'll run down leads up until it goes to court. I mean, it doesn't end when the arrest is made. That's when the work begins, really. You start running down leads and evidence goes to the lab and so forth and so on until you're done.
You said earlier you had one chance to work the scene, and that could last hours, days, I guess, to make sure you've gotten everything you need. You get that one shot to get hair fibers, carpet fibers, whatever you need in the scene. who decides that you can open up the crime scene now and give it back to the family or whoever will take over the property? Let's use this apartment, or for example, of the mother and 2 children. How long did you all work that scene, and who makes that determination, Tim, as to when it's okay for anyone to go in?
We'll generally, the lead investigator will make that determination along with the crime scene team with input from the other 2 investigators. We will generally all sit down and whether it's going through photographs, most of the time it includes or it involves the lead investigator going back to the scene and rewalking the scene after the entire thing's been processed, just to try to get a sense of of the scene and to make sure that we've got everything. And if there's ever a question, the question should never be answered, do you think we ought to collect that? If the question's asked,
then collect it.
So, but it's a decision that the lead investigator will make with an abundant amount of input.
Obviously, Allan, you're dealing with emotions with family members and so forth. Neighbors, for example, I would assume that neighbors are wondering, what's going on over there? Are we in danger? How do you have to make a lot of really quick, serious, decisions for, everybody. The neighbors obviously see all the cops, the crime scene tape. That's never a good sign. You guys are out there plain clothes, and, you have to make a lot of quick decisions to reassure the neighbors, okay, everything's cool, we got it under control. How do you determine that?
Well, we do our job, and then if you have a lot of neighbors, like you said, to deal with and stuff, we usually pass that up to our supervisors because we're busy, and let them handle that, or with our PIO, Jim Noel, and let him handle that. And outside of what we're doing, we kind of stay away from it because we just don't have time.
Yeah. Now, we've referenced a couple of high-profile cases here in this community, which are, they are what they are, Taco Bell, Baskin-Robbins, and so forth. And I'm trying to remember others that, that we may remember that have happened here, but family members want answers right away.
Sure, they do.
Yes.
There were family members in this particular case, the mother and 2 children. Were they nearby, or when you identified them, did you find them and let them know? How does that handle?
Right. We usually, that's one of the priority things, is to notify family so they don't read about it in the paper or hear it on the radio or on TV. And we try to do that in person if they're local, or if they're not local, we will try to get a local police or sheriff's office to send someone out and notify them in person.
How does that go down?
We usually handle that personally. If it's out of town, because we want to make sure it's done, and we'll call the police department and talk to them. They're usually pretty good about sending an officer or a chaplain or whatever they have available out to the house and talk to the family, and then put them back in contact with us, and then they will call us, and we will tell them.
You tell them on the phone?
We don't tell them they're dead, no.
No.
The officers that go out there, we get them to go ahead and tell it in person, because it's easier on the person than hearing it on the phone. And sometimes that doesn't work. They end up calling you, and you do have to tell them on the phone. That's probably the worst thing you have to do.
When you make that call, when you make that knock on the door, how does that go down?
Well, you just have to. What I learned early on was you do it quick. You don't make them, because they know something's wrong. If I come knocking on your door, and you know something's wrong.
You ain't there to borrow a cup of sugar.
Right. You know something's wrong, so you have to tell it quick and as gentle as you can. It just depends on the situation. People react different.
Mrs. So-and-so, I'm sorry to inform you that your son has been killed.
Right. And then after the initial shock wears off, you just wait, and then you answer the questions that you can answer.
Yeah. I don't think anyone can understand how you guys do that. You just, it's just an emotional roller coaster, just unbelievable that, and I hear this all the time about law enforcement, your training. What, Tim, do you guys possibly train for to deal with the psychological and the emotional aspects of your job? It's one thing to spend time on the range. It's one thing to spend time in the gym. It's one thing to spend time in the books. It's one thing to spend time, looking over old cases and seeing what you could do to be better. But, training for walking in on that scene, delivering that news to a mother or a spouse or whoever? How do you do that?
There's some things I don't know that you can get good training for, and doing a notification is one of them. But I think that you just, and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit before on things that have happened in the past and how we respond to them. You just go into it with the knowledge of I can either make this investigation worse for myself, or I can do it right, and so you use caution. You be as understanding as you can, and you also understand that if you allow your emotions to enter into that case, that could potentially cause you to either miss something important or misinterpret something important and cause you problems down the road.
Allan, not everybody's made out to do this, obviously. How did you know you were?
It just came to me as a natural thing for some reason. I really don't know. I started out doing it, and I enjoyed the job, and it's just grown on me, and it's never my urgency to do it. I really can't answer that question. It's just something that I feel like it's just what I do.
It's obviously not what we see on TV. We understand that. So you weren't led to do something like this because of what you may have seen or grown up watching some cop show, Hawaii 5-0 or something? Or,
No.
No? You always had an interest in law enforcement?
Well, pretty much off and on.
Did you just fall into this, or you want to be a cop? You want to get the bad guy? You play cops and robbers when you were little? I'm just curious how folks find their way.
I didn't start until being a police officer until I was in my 30s. Before that, I wasn't a police officer.
Someone noticed
something that I got interested in.
You mentioned a minute ago a couple of cases that you knew you had the guy, and he's still walking. He's still out there.
Right.
Are there a lot of those? Unfortunately, are there a lot of those? Do they still dog you?
All the unsolved was dog you. The ones that you couldn't solve, you're always thinking, what could I have done different? What can I do different? And you always want to be able to solve them for the families, because you do become close to families during these investigations.
They expect you to solve it.
Sure.
I mean, they don't expect anything else out of you except, I want to know who did it. I want him in jail.
But we want them to expect that, and that's our jobs. So
cool.
And
any case stand out that you really can't let go of, Allan, that either went unsolved or you didn't get the conviction you wanted? Or were you involved in the Kathy Nishiyama?
No, that was before my time.
Okay. Was it a man? What was the beard? What was the little girl? Did you all handle that, or was that a county thing? They're all running together for me. I've covered so many.
Jackie Beard. That was a county case.
Okay. One we talked about earlier, former businessman here, Clarksville businessman Howard Beatty.
Right.
That crime is still talked about.
It's
in this city.
It's still unsolved, and it's there's not a whole lot of leads in it, because that occurred early not early. It was.
It happened during my morning show.
Probably around 8 o'clock, I want to say.
Yeah, and we got a call about it, that there had been there was shots fired. It was right off of North 2nd, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, behind the minute mark.
And car fled the scene, and I'm like, well, that's...
Just drove by, shot him as he's getting into his vehicle. And just kept on going.
Never found you found the car?
Never found nothing.
How does that happen? That only happens on TV.
It just happens. I mean, it was somebody laying in wait for him, and waited for him to come out of his house, shot him, and kept on going. And
no witnesses.
No witnesses.
Nobody saw a car. Nobody saw anything.
We got a brief description of a vehicle that we put out.
It's like a powder blue something, wasn't it?
Some sedan. I really don't remember, and we never could locate it.
So you immediately, obviously, are putting out you didn't even have a description of anything to look for, I don't guess.
Nothing.
You couldn't put out an alert or a bolo about look out for this. You just
of course, you alert your officers in the area to be looking for something. And we did get a brief description. I want to say he was wearing a mask. Like a ski mask, I believe.
Shell casings, nothing.
Nothing. His revolver.
So how did you, I guess it didn't take you long to figure, you got nothing here.
We run down leads for days on that one. And there's volumes of case file in it, but nothing that you can hang your hat on.
Yeah. Well, that's a real shame. And obviously, it's very disappointing. You guys like a perfect record. You want them solved, don't you, Tim?
Oh, absolutely.
You absolutely want them solved. Leave no stone unturned. You want to bring them to court, bring them to justice, do what's necessary. Anything stand out in your career so far, Tim, or in your mind about a crime or a suspect? Can you tell us a little bit about the demeanor of suspects when they're caught? In other words, are they obviously to be in one mindset to do this is something I can't understand. And then the other mindset of you confront them, you interrogate them. What is that all about? How do you get it out of them? I mean, they don't shove bamboo shoots up their nails and stuff like that anymore, do we? They never did all that. I mean, how do you get it out of them?
Sometimes you don't. But it really, no two are the same. You'll have somebody that is just completely has zero remorse, wasn't there, wasn't involved, didn't do it, you can't prove it type thing. And then you'll have the other ones who will become emotional, and they'll, and they'll tell you what happened.
You want a confession, don't you, Allan?
Sure.
That's best case scenario.
Sure.
All right, you sit down with a guy in a room and, just you and him, and, you scare the bejeebies out of most people, I'm assuming. I mean,
Not really.
You're like me. You're not as attractive as most of us would like to be.
I can be compassionate.
No, you can't.
Friendly, sure.
I've known you for a long time. I'd have to get verification from your wife on that one right there. But anyway, you got a guy, and you guys have done your legwork. You got your files. You got your evidence, whatever. This is the guy. You go in, you sit down. We see this all the time. Roscoe, I know you did it. We have the evidence. Numbnuts over here said you did it. I got his statement, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Is that a fair approach for it? Because I sometimes will see that on some of these documentaries go, dude, it's a little over the line.
Sometimes it varies, though. Sometimes you go in, it just depends on the person, and you've tried to study them a little bit before you go in there, study their history, what they've done in the past, if they've done anything. We'll get some folks that have never done anything, and this is their first crime. And those are probably the hardest to read, because you don't know what emotions they're going to put out or what demeanor they're going to be. So you have to go in there and you just small talk at first usually. Just just
the Shield.
Try to get a feel.
The show The Shield. I'm a huge fan. I don't know if you all watch it or not. You're familiar with it? Are you familiar with it too?
I may have watched it once.
Oh, come on, you guys, give me a break. Surely you've seen it. Well, anyway, surely real life's not like that. I mean, I can't imagine. So
I've heard about it, and
it can't be really like that. I mean, it's. But interrogations, when you got your guy, Tim, your approach, it seems to me, would be one of, okay, I'm going to lead you down this path, and then you're just going to...
It really depends on the person. And we will probably spend, we'll know quite a lot about that person by the time that we walk in that door. And, we've got the necessary paperwork to go through, the Miranda and the interview forms that we fill out. And a lot of times it just starts with a conversation that is, about, what were you doing, today? Not as far as, your involvement in this, but...
timelines seem to trip a lot of people up, don't they, Allan? I mean,
yeah, you get a timeline pinned down pretty tight, and it's hard for them to wiggle out of it. And they'll try to justify or, make it what they know fit.
Yeah.
And you really don't tell them at first that a timeline. You get their story first, and then you go back over it and explain to them, you got to explain this because this couldn't have happened because this happened, and stuff like that.
There's something that usually presents itself in a case like that, I think, doesn't it? That, okay, that's what you were looking for. I mean, I don't know if it might be a fingerprint or it might be a fiber. Now DNA is getting to be, the last number of years has been very key in investigations. I understand with Paul Dennis Reed I can't remember. Did you work that case or not? Or
I helped on the peripheral. Robert Miller was.
I understand it was credit card receipts, and the time of those receipts.
I believe it was credit card receipts and some DNA on some shoes that he had.
That led them to him.
Right. Well, I think that Metro got him, and then they tied our case back to theirs, to him. I believe it's big correct.
Have you quit trying to understand why this happens? Did you ever, Tim, you're relatively new into this field, I guess, as a homicide investigator. Allan, you've done it for a number of years. At what point did you just quit trying to figure out, why in the hell does this happen? Why do we kill our fellow human being?
Most of the time, a lot of times there is a reason, and a lot of times there isn't, but most of the time it's not a logical reason that you'll ever figure out why somebody did something, especially to a kid. You know, kids are the worst. You can't, there's no reason. And you never know.
That's why I don't understand why you get so upset about that. This recent case involving Gerard Robinson, how soon are you able to say how soon you were able to develop him as a suspect?
He was developed early on. I believe that, I won't say just within a few hours.
How so?
Picked him up. Just
Can
through
you say
information. You know,
he was the last one there? Or
just through information. It's Detective Finley's case, and I don't want to talk out of school on it.
Well, it's when that happens, you identify someone, Tim, what happens next? And we don't have him in custody. If someone presents themselves that, and let's just say you've been working on a case for, say, a couple of days. He's been out for a couple of days, been on the loose a couple of days. All right, you've zeroed in on a suspect.
We get to know him before we even go talk to him. And then,
you find him first.
Yeah.
You try to find him first.
Yeah, and our drug unit is outstanding for locating people, so we utilize them to help us find people. And then we'll make contact with them, and depending on the case and on what we have, we may have a plainclothes officer contact them and say, hey, you know, one of our guys needs to talk to you downtown. Can you come on downtown? You know, we like to start at that level.
Who in his right mind is going to come downtown just to have a chat with you?
Somebody that don't think that we have.
Why do people do that? I mean, so you sent a plainclothes, and he's over here to Good Time Charlie, and he's a suspect. And so a plainclothes come and say, you know, look, by the way, I got a buddy of mine down at the office. He wonder if you could drop by for a chat. Got some donuts, got a cup of coffee, got a Coca-Cola. I didn't mean to say donuts. I don't know why that came out. But I mean, why does a guy want to come down and talk to you?
And this is just an opinion, but I think that sometimes when people think that they're going to help the police out with a case, that it'll make the police think that maybe it's not me. You know, and I think that some cases, you know, some people come down on that pretext.
Allan, they all feel like they can get away with it, obviously. It's not been thought through completely. I know we've learned that, but, I mean...
A lot of them do, and a lot of them will know that they can't, and they're the ones that will come forth to confess right away. But a lot of folks think that they can outsmart the police, and
they see that as a challenge, don't they?
Sure.
I mean, it's like, okay, well, you know, whatever. I'm smarter than them, and I've never understood how, without a warrant, without having them arrested, you're able to bring suspects. And I realize that there's a certain protocol of trying to clear people of interest right away. Unfortunately, these days, you know, when it involves the death of a woman who has a husband or ex, unfortunately, nowadays, he is your first person of interest.
Right.
And you want to more so clear him than you want to arrest him.
Because that helps us to go on to looking for the real killer. If they're not the suspect, then their cooperation helps you to determine whether they're involved or not.
Do you find yourselves getting interested in other high-profile cases that the media just beats to death? You know, the Kaylee Anthony thing, the guy who, I can't remember his name. He's the guy who used to be an ex-cop. He's like been through 2 or 3 wives or something. They're missing. One's missing and found, whatever. You know, and he's out. And he's the one filming the media. You know what I'm talking about? I can't think of his name. Gary,
I know who you're talking about.
Do you find yourself getting interested?
I don't have time.
You don't have time?
No.
So you don't watch any TV?
I do watch TV, but I try not to watch so much news.
Right.
Because it's...
You got to get away from it.
Yeah, and it's the same, you know, you don't have time to think about those cases because you get your own.
Yeah. Something we hear too much of, and it makes us curious about law enforcement, is that he was not properly Mirandized. Okay, was not read his rights. How does that happen? Do you get asked that a lot?
Oh,
I mean, whose responsibility is it?
Of course. I mean, that's an almost an automatic challenge for defense, and I mean the way it's handled, and it's a personal procedure that I've elected to go through is, I mean, if there's any question, whether it's a witness or a suspect, you know, we'll do an interview sheet, which is just an information sheet stating that we talked to this person on this day. And, you know, we can, you know, you go ahead and do a Miranda warning right there and make sure that they explain it to them.
We talked earlier about, you may, and I'm going to wrap this up, but you may ask, Sim, you said earlier that you may get a plainclothes guy to say, you know, they want to have a chat with you. You know, you help them with the case, and he may be your suspect. Don't you have to read him his rights when he hints them there?
If he comes in on his own and he leaves, Miranda's not required. Arrest has to be one of the...
Custody.
Well, custody has to be one of the issues that you have to address if they're in custody when you Mirandize them.
Well, I think that most of us dummies that really don't know a lot about what you do, and they think, well, you know, he was released because he was not given his rights. How does that happen? You know, I think that's the first question.
It happens.
And, yeah. Isn't that amazing?
And that's up to, that's why we have the Supreme Court and appellate courts and all that.
Detective Allan Charvis and Detective Tim Anderson sharing with us their work, and we appreciate them doing that. Allan gave me a thing we're going to be telling you more about, District 7 Tactical Training Center. This is a project that we're trying to move forward within the department, within the city.
What it is, it's a city, county venture. It's a training facility out in Southside that Lieutenant David Crocker with our department and Craig Myers with the county are trying to get together and build a shoot house to better train officers. And it's on some property donated out at the shooting range in Southside that TWRA runs out there. They've donated the land, and now we're trying to raise money to build a shoot house and other things to better our department, not only our department, but surrounding counties.
Sure. Well, we're going to be talking more about this here in the coming weeks, put this on our website, and make the public aware any way they want to help. I appreciate you bringing me this, and we'll get a chance to chat with him maybe one day down the road. Tim, thanks for coming in.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate all that you guys do, and that you have a real passion for what you do, and that you all are willing to be the first ones there and help us through these tragedies, Allan. We've been obviously following your career for a long time, and I'm proud to say I'm the only guy in the media you really like.
Thank you.
I'm just asking, can you confirm that for me? I'm just...
I like everybody.
Yeah. You soften up over time, you know. I mean, I can tell some stories that I will not, but because I've been around a long time. Shoot, I'm an old dog. So, but we appreciate you, man. We really do. All of you folks in the police department, everything that you do. Tim, thank you for coming in. And again, our thanks to our guests this morning, Jim Summerall from the school system, and our two fine detectives with the Clarksville Police Department. You see their names in the paper all the time. I want to not mention Tim Finley and Ashby, Lieutenant Ashby, Major Crimes Director, and all that. We appreciate it. I'm